Hi everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about a concept that I had some trouble understanding while going over my assigned reading for my anatomy and physiology class, and that's homeostasis, especially negative feedback. So I came up with an example that helped me put it all together. I do want to preface that it is non-biological and non-physiological. It's more of like a silly real life scenario, but it worked for me, and hopefully it'll work for you guys as well. And I have my textbook here as well with definitions for reference, so we can tie it all together. So what is negative feedback? So according to my textbook, most homeostatic control mechanisms are negative feedback mechanisms. In these systems, the output shuts off the original effect of the stimulus or reduces its intensity. So basically, from what I'm understanding, the goal is to bring everything back to a balance, or reduce the effect of what the stimulus caused. So I'm going to start drawing, and I'm gonna do stick figures and arrows, so it's not gonna be super artistic, but hopefully it makes sense. So I'm going to use this example. So I'm going to draw a little cartoon here. I'm one-handed, so hopefully you guys can see. Okay, so this is Betty. Her name is Betty, and so this example will be called Drama in the Workplace. Bear with me. So this is Betty. Betty has a habit of gossiping at work. She likes to talk about her coworkers. She just goes in and starts talking about people at work. So she's gossiping. Gossip. All right, so Betty's gossiping, talking about people, and then two of her coworkers, making sure this is focused. Oops, okay, that looks a little weird, but two of her coworkers hear her gossiping, and obviously they don't really like that, and so they hear. So they hear her gossiping, and they don't really like that. Looks more like they're panicking, but I guess she must have been saying some pretty crazy things. So they hear her, and then they think, oh, well, we gotta report that because that's not okay. So they walk down this hallway or pathway called let's call it the afferent pathway. Afferent hallway to get to their boss. And let's call him Michael. Like Michael Scott. If you watch The Office, you probably get that reference. If not, it's okay. Okay, so let's, how do you draw a tie? So that's a tie. He's got his suit here. Okay, not my best drawing, but it's cool. It's just for example. Okay, so these are coworkers. Okay. And here's Michael. So boss, Michael. Yeah, so he hears this information, and he decides what is right and what isn't, and what needs to take, I guess, action. He determines an appropriate response. So then, after he hears he's judgment. He decides whether Betty was really saying something mean and horrible and gossiping, or whether it was just harmless morning talk or small talk. But in this case, he decides that it's not the best thing, not the nicest thing to say about people, so he makes a judgment call. That's not okay. That's not okay. Yeah, so he determines what response to take after that. So he says that's not okay. And then just forgot to draw an arrow there. So then here goes Michael. Again, hopefully Michael. Okay, I'm so sorry. My drawings just keep getting progressively worse. But yeah, anyway, so he writes up a report. He writes up a report of what happened. Report of what happened. And he then takes it to HR. Ooh, got serious here. So HR, I'm gonna draw the prototype for HR people. I mean, I assume that's, anyway, they all look the same. Yeah, so he takes it to HR and to stop the gossip. So yeah, so then HR decides that it needs to stop. So then HR we're gonna draw our good friend Betty here. Yeah, she's in trouble. Okay, and then the HR lady. Okay, somehow her head grew bigger as she approached Betty, so ignore that. Okay. And then she's gonna have the written note here from Michael. Okay. Betty, HR lady, Michael. Okay. Yeah, so now they're talking, and she is giving her feedback on her behavior. Feedback on her behavior. Eventually, Betty stops gossiping. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. Yeah, so that's basically my example, but now I'm going to explain it and how this helped me with negative feedback. Now, I also want to say that negative feedback doesn't necessarily always mean that it's something bad, especially, I guess, biologically speaking. It just means that whatever the stimulus has to be stopped, or whatever change the stimulus caused has to be regulated back to how it used to be, or balanced, I guess, per se. But anyway, back to this drama in the workplace scenario here. So now we're going to use these words, these terms here, and you might be familiar with them. You will learn more about them. Stimulus, receptor, input, afferent pathway, control center, efferent Afferent pathway. Output. Effector. And finally, response. Response. Okay. So now we're going to use these terms and apply them onto this scenario here. So what would be the stimulus of all of this? So the stimulus was Betty's gossip. So because that's what caused this whole entire action here to happen. So gossip, Betty's gossip. So that was the stimulus. Stimulus, so think about like stimulus. Stimulus, like stimulated, like causing change. And then, so we got stimulus down, and I'm going to use my textbook to define some of these words here. Stimulus right here. So stimulus produces change in variable. So what caused this change? If everything was fine, everybody was happy at work, just, working, minding their own business, until good old Betty here came up and started gossiping about people. So that is what produced the change, which is people getting upset, then the boss taking action, and then HR getting involved, and all of that good stuff. Well, not good stuff, but yeah. Anyway, so then now we got stimulus down. So again, stimulus produces a change in the variable. It's what triggers it to happen. Triggers change. And then receptor. So my textbook says that receptor detects change. So in this case, who detected the change? If everybody was happy and working and just, having a grand old day, what I guess detected the change were the coworkers. In this case, they're not too happy hearing Betty gossip. So we're gonna do, actually, I'm gonna use a different color. Receptors. And I'm just gonna underline that because I don't want to write over that. Receptors. So again, they detected the change. They detected the change, and then it also, I have another definition. Well, it's the same definition, just goes a little bit more in depth. So the first component after the stimulus affects the variable. The receptor is some type of sensor that monitors the environment and responds to changes called stimuli. So the coworker sensed a change in the workplace vibe. It changed, and they didn't like that, so stimulus the gossip. So now they're going to take it over to Michael here. And I used afferent hallway, but really, receptor here, and then now we're moving on to afferent pathway. So I used afferent hallway, but really the correct name for it is called afferent pathway. Afferent pathway. So that is this guy here, and according to my textbook, afferent pathway is basically where is it here? Okay. Input flows from the receptor control center along the afferent pathway. So once the receptors, aka the coworkers, detected the change or the gossip, they walked down the afferent pathway. So it's basically, my book said, it's information that goes to the control center, and that is Michael. Control center. And why is Michael the control center? Why is the boss here the control center? Well, according to the textbook, the control center here determines the set point which is the level or range at which variable is to be maintained. Or in other words, the input it receives and determines the appropriate, it analyzes the input it receives and determines the appropriate response. So the input, I forgot to mention earlier. So also, the coworkers going up to Michael and telling Michael what happened, kind of, I guess, complaining about Betty's gossiping was the input. So, sorry, my hand's a little shaky. Was the input. And Michael is a control center because based on the input based on the input from what the coworker said about the gossip, he was able to make an appropriate response, and him being like, well, that's not okay. So that is why he is a control center. And then Michael then takes it over to efferent. See, he walks down the efferent pathway. Efferent pathway. So efferent pathway, again, it means when output flows from the control center to the third component, the effector, along the efferent pathway. So Michael walks down the efferent pathway or efferent hallway to take his output, which is the report or information. Output, report, or info of what happened, which is this whole thing here, to HR. So that is the output, and of course he walks down the efferent pathway or hallway all the way to HR so he can report what happened. And control center, check. Efferent pathway, check. Output, check. So it leaves effector and response. So in this case, HR will be the effector. Effector. And what is an effector? Well, the effector provides the means for the control center response output to the stimulus. So basically what HR will be doing is it will cause the response, I guess. So HR is the effector because it's what's going to lead to the response, which is this right here, response. And I'll explain it a little better in a minute. So according to the textbook, response of effector feeds back to reduce the effect of stimulus and returns variable to homeostatic level. So once HR decides that it needs to give Betty feedback, that is a response. So it'll give Betty feedback so she can stop gossiping, which is the stimulus. So it will stop. So reduce / stop gossip in the office. AKA workplace. AKA stimulus. AKA stimulus. Because that was the response that the effector, or that was from the effector. The effector just basically said, no, stop, no more. So that was a response, aka the feedback, to Betty, and that will stop her gossip, aka stimulus. Yeah, that's basically it. So I understand that so this may or may not help you. I hope it did help you. If not, I apologize. It helped me understand it better because this is just an everyday life scenario. For those of you that work and go to school and have basically no social life, this is something that just I came up with in my head. But yeah, I hope this was helpful to you. If not, I hope that you can find another resource that is more helpful to you, like a YouTube video on the subject, or maybe examples from your textbook, your professor or instructor. But if it was helpful, great, I'm happy. All right, well, good luck everyone learning this complicated material. Bye.